An FBI report was filed by a bank executive against an African-American customer attempting to transfer his personal funds. Moments afterward, federal officers entered the building and offered him a military salute. The events unfolded during a typical Thursday afternoon in Little Rock, Arkansas. The sun blazed overhead, humidity filled the air, vehicles crowded the streets, and the aroma of deep-fried fish wafted from a mobile vendor positioned opposite Jefferson State Bank on 4th Street. Beyond the transparent entrance, the facility maintained a pristine and temperature-controlled environment, alive with the soft sounds of financial business. Everything appeared routine, simply people attempting to complete their daily tasks. Derek Langston then entered, an African-American gentleman in his late 30s, dressed in an impeccably fitted charcoal suit, sporting a fresh haircut and clean-shaven appearance. His demeanor commanded attention. Composed, intelligent, displaying understated self-assurance. He resembled someone with extensive experience who felt no compulsion to boast about it. His movements were deliberate yet unhurried. Without ostentation, avoiding loud conversations or disorganized paperwork, carrying only a black leather portfolio and offering a confident greeting to the security personnel at the entrance. "Good afternoon, sir," the guard acknowledged. Derek returned the greeting courteously. "Good afternoon." He proceeded to the customer service queue and positioned himself behind an elderly pair discussing church matters and their grandson's athletic performance. He refrained from interrupting, simply waiting patiently while observing his surroundings. He took note of the manager's transparent office positioned in the corner, 2 surveillance devices mounted on the ceiling, and a young receptionist at the front desk browsing social media while chewing gum, all details he mentally catalogued. Eventually reaching the teller station, he was welcomed by a woman in her 20s. Her identification badge displayed Brianna. "Hello there. How may I assist you today?" "Yes, I need to complete a wire transfer from my personal account. I contacted someone by telephone yesterday. They informed me I could visit to authenticate my documents." "Certainly, do you have identification?" He provided his passport and a federal military identification card. While she examined them, her pleasant demeanor remained unchanged, though her body language shifted subtly. Her shoulders tensed slightly. Her smile appeared more forced. She entered information into her computer. "One moment, sir." He remained composed, standing quietly. She summoned a supervisor, speaking in hushed tones behind her palm. Then she directed Derek toward a seating area nearby. "Mr. Langston, would you please move over there? My manager will speak with you shortly to ensure everything proceeds smoothly." Derek questioned with raised eyebrows, "Is there an issue?" She attempted a nervous laugh. "Oh, certainly not. This is simply routine procedure for substantial transactions." He offered a slight smile and moved aside, though the atmosphere had changed. Surrounding customers began to notice, subtle but curious glances. He caught sight of a man completing a deposit form looking his way. A woman in the lending queue retrieved her mobile device. He seated himself, crossed his legs, and waited. However, he observed something concerning. The manager, a middle-aged gentleman with receding hair and wire-rimmed spectacles, Philip Corbin, wasn't approaching to meet him. Instead, he stood in his office, staring at Derek. Then gradually, he closed the window coverings. Derek's expression hardened slightly. He glanced at his timepiece. 3 minutes elapsed, then 4, but that's when the situation began feeling suspicious. Derek remained motionless. He had acquired the importance of patience long ago during reconnaissance missions in a Middle Eastern city that most Americans couldn't locate on a world map. Therefore, he waited and observed. The blinds trembled slightly. Within the office, Philip Corbin held a telephone against his ear. His expression was tense. He repeatedly glanced through the frosted glass at Derek's seated outline. Corbin wasn't conducting a customer service inquiry. From across the lobby, Brianna continued glancing over nervously. She appeared anxious now. Not puzzled, but genuinely worried. Derek's facial expression remained unchanged, but internally his analytical mind began connecting the dots once again. This experience wasn't unprecedented. Not identical circumstances, not the same venue, but the same expressions, the same hesitation, the same whispered conversations. Previously, though, he carried credentials, had backup, held authority. Now he was simply a man in business attire attempting to transfer his personal funds. He adjusted his watch. 7 minutes had passed. Corbin then opened his door and emerged, cleaning his glasses with a tissue. He attempted to appear casual, but his eyes darted nervously. "Mr. Langston," he called out. Derek rose to his feet. Corbin displayed a rigid smile. Would you mind coming into my office briefly? Just a quick authentication matter. Derek's voice remained steady. Authentication regarding what specifically? Oh, it's nothing concerning, Corbin responded dismissively. We simply need to verify some internal system alerts. Derek nodded deliberately. Very well. Inside the office, Corbin closed the door. Would you care for some water? He offered. I'm fine. Corbin cleared his throat and sat behind his desk. So, the sum you're transferring today, was it 1.3 million? 1.2, actually. Corbin nodded too eagerly. Correct. Right. You must understand that this type of transfer triggers several system alerts, particularly with the federal documentation. No disrespect intended, naturally. We must exercise caution. Derek looked directly into his eyes. You contacted the FBI, didn't you? Corbin blinked in surprise. Pardon me? I've collaborated with those agencies. I recognize what a surveillance call looks like. An uncomfortable pause followed. Corbin attempted another smile, but it faltered at the edges. Sir, this isn't personal. You must comprehend how this appears from our perspective. Large transfer, uncommon documentation. It's standard procedure to escalate when details don't align. Derek leaned back slightly. Is my identification fraudulent? No, it seems authentic. It's just that we rarely encounter that level of security clearance. And when we do, protocol takes effect. You mean when an African-American man with federal credentials attempts to move his money? Corbin's face reddened. That's not what I stated. But it's what you implied. Corbin's mouth twitched. Look, they'll arrive shortly. I'm confident once they speak with you, everything will be resolved. Derek settled back. All right then. I'll wait. Outside, people were beginning to take notice. A security guard had moved closer to the office. A woman was whispering to her child. Mobile phones were being raised. Brianna stood behind her counter, nervously fidgeting with a pen. The receptionist had stopped chewing her gum. But none of them anticipated what was about to enter through that door. 10 minutes. That's how long Derek had been sitting in that glass-walled office, visible to everyone yet isolated. Philip Corbin pretended to review paperwork, but his hands trembled slightly. He kept checking the clock. Derek sat silently across from him, legs crossed once more, motionless, not blinking unnecessarily. No intimidation, no hostility, just commanding presence. And that's what made Corbin perspire even more. He stood abruptly. I'm going to get a manager from upstairs. Just remain here, Mr. Langston. Derek's voice was calm. Take your time. Corbin exited quickly, almost as if fleeing the room. But rather than going upstairs, he went directly to the rear corridor where the bank's private telephone lines were hidden from view. He didn't use his cellular phone this time. He used the landline behind the emergency exit door. Concealed, quiet. He placed another call. Yes, this is Philip Corbin, Jefferson State Bank, downtown location. I previously reported the incident. Yes, the individual is still present. No, he hasn't departed. He's in my office. Yes, African-American male in a suit. Late 30s. He provided some type of federal identification. Appears genuine, but I have concerns. Pause. Corbin looked around, lowering his voice. I suspect he's either impersonating someone or using stolen credentials. I'm uncertain. I just know something doesn't seem right. He claims to be transferring over $1 million. I've never encountered an African-American client moving that amount of money with that type of documentation. Look, I understand how this sounds, but something about this situation feels wrong. Another pause. Then the agent on the line said something that made Corbin freeze. His eyes narrowed. He lowered the phone from his ear momentarily as if he hadn't heard correctly. Then slowly he raised it again. Wait, who? What do you mean he's flagged internally but not for fraud? What does do not approach mean? But before he could ask anything else, he heard it. Sirens, not blaring, but not subtle either. A black SUV arrived outside the bank, followed by another, both unmarked. The glass doors opened almost simultaneously, and two men in dark suits entered, earpieces visible, sunglasses on, moving as if they already controlled the space. Conversations ceased, phones were raised, children were pulled closer, customers stepped backward. Brianna looked up, startled. May I help you? The taller one displayed a badge without speaking. They scanned the room and walked directly toward the office. Corbin stood frozen near the back hallway, mouth partially open. Inside the office, Derek remained seated, still calm. The first agent opened the door. Derek rose slowly. The agent removed his sunglasses. His eyes narrowed, not in suspicion, but in recognition. He stepped forward, stood before Derek, and saluted. Everyone witnessed it. Everyone. A hush descended across the entire bank. The second agent entered behind him and did the same, a quiet, respectful salute, as if greeting someone who had once been their superior. "Sir," the first agent said, voice steady. "We apologize for the delay." Corbin's mouth dropped open. He stepped forward. "Wait, what is this?" He came in claiming he was. The agent turned. "He didn't claim anything. You called us regarding Colonel Derek Jerome Langston, former Deputy Director of the Joint Counterintelligence Task Force." The silence that followed felt substantial. Brianna gasped. The receptionist dropped her phone. A man in the lone line whispered, "Oh my God." But the most silent person in the room was Corbin. He finally understood what he had just done. Corbin couldn't speak. His mouth opened, but no words emerged. The name struck him like a blow. Colonel. Counterintelligence. He attempted to backtrack. I didn't know. He didn't identify himself. But Derek hadn't moved an inch. He stood tall, but not angry, not triumphant, just present. The first agent, Agent Hines, turned to Derek again, his tone remaining formal. "Sir, our apologies for the public approach. When your name appeared in dispatch, we responded immediately. We weren't provided much information, just a flagged incident at a civilian bank." Derek nodded. "Understood." Agent Hines turned to Corbin. "Can you explain what exactly prompted you to call us?" Corbin's face turned red. There were discrepancies. Well, the amount, the ID, the documentation. It just didn't appear. Didn't appear what? Derek asked, voice quiet. Corbin looked away. Agent Hines took a slow step forward. "You ran a check on him and flagged his federal credentials. Do you have any idea what it requires to obtain that level of clearance? You called us, assuming you were reporting a criminal. What you actually did was trigger a restricted file alert and nearly caused a federal emergency." Corbin stumbled. I didn't intend any harm. I thought I was following protocol." "No, you weren't," Agent Hines snapped. "You were following your own prejudice." That hit differently. The words ricocheted off the walls of the bank like someone had dropped a stone into calm water. Derek finally spoke again, calm, controlled. "You didn't question the documents because they appeared suspicious. You questioned them because I didn't look like the type of man who should possess them." Corbin blinked hard. "That's not fair. But it's accurate." The agent stood silently for a moment. Then Agent Hines turned to Derek. "Sir, do you wish to file a formal complaint? Discrimination, racial profiling, false report. It's within your rights." Everyone in the bank froze, watching, waiting. Derek looked around the room at the people who had watched him sit in silence while judgment formed around him. At Brianna, who now appeared to wish she could vanish. At Corbin, who finally seemed to grasp the gravity of what he'd done. "No," Derek said finally. "I didn't come here to punish anyone." He paused. "But I will say this. If your instinctive reaction to an African-American man in a suit with money is to assume he's a criminal, the problem isn't with paperwork, it's with you." Corbin swallowed hard. I'm sorry. I'm not the one you need to apologize to." Derek turned, picked up his briefcase, and nodded to the agents. "I'll complete my transaction now." Agent Hines opened the door for him. As Derek stepped out into the lobby, no one spoke. No one needed to. But the tension that had filled that room just moments before had reversed. And now every single person was watching Corbin for an entirely different reason. Derek didn't storm out. He didn't lecture. He didn't raise his voice. He simply walked back to the teller window where this all began. Same calm steps, same quiet presence, but now the entire room stood motionless. Brianna was still at her station. She looked up when Derek approached and immediately stepped back, uncertain what to say, how to even make eye contact. "Sir, I'm sorry," she said, voice barely audible. Derek gave her a small nod. "I'm ready to complete the transfer." She swallowed. "Yes, of course, immediately." Her hands moved quickly now, but clumsily. She had to retype the account number twice because her fingers kept shaking. When she requested confirmation, Derek leaned in slightly and responded, his tone neutral, not unkind. Behind him, The agent stood near the door, arms crossed, observing everything unfold. Across the room, a man in a polo shirt leaned over and whispered to someone, "That's the guy the FBI saluted. Did you see that?" A woman near the loan department whispered, "I thought he was a scammer or something." I mean, the manager was so certain. People were uncomfortable, but not because of Derek. They were uncomfortable with themselves because deep down most of them had made the same assumption Corbin had. They hadn't voiced it, but they'd watched, waited, filmed, wondered, whispered, judged. It wasn't until someone else treated Derek with respect that they suddenly realized they hadn't. As Brianna printed the confirmation receipt and handed it to Derek, she said, "I didn't know. I didn't intend to." He looked at her, eyes steady. "It's not about what you intended. It's about what you did." She nodded. "You're right." He took the receipt, folded it, and tucked it into his briefcase, then turned around. Corbin was still in the back, arms crossed, his face pale. Derek walked over to him, slow but direct. The room quieted again. He stopped just a few feet away. "I spent nearly 2 decades working in intelligence," he said, not loudly, but audibly enough. "I've sat in rooms with war criminals. I've intercepted threats before they reached this country. I've made decisions that saved lives, and some I still carry with me." Corbin didn't speak. Derek took a slow breath. "I never once judged someone by the language they spoke, the country they came from, or the way they looked because I was trained to look at facts, not fears." He took one step closer. "You could have asked questions. You could have verified the information, but instead you made a phone call that could have ended very differently. All because you didn't like how I looked carrying success." Corbin's voice cracked. "I was wrong." "Yes, you were." And that was all Derek said. No threats, no yelling, no demand for consequences. He didn't need to, because the silence that followed said everything. Corbin stood frozen, eyes on the floor. He looked like he wanted the building to swallow him whole. But Derek was already walking toward the exit, flanked by the 2 federal agents who were still standing watch. The whole bank followed him with their eyes, phones lowered now, faces a mix of shame, disbelief, and quiet awe. Near the front door, a voice called out, "Sir, wait." It was the regional bank director, a woman named Joanne Renea, who had arrived during the last few minutes. No one even saw her come in. She looked to be in her late 40s, sharp blazer, heels clicking fast against the tile as she caught up to Derek. She'd obviously been briefed on the situation. Her face said it all. "I just need one moment of your time, Colonel Langston." Derek stopped, turned. "Go ahead. I want to offer you a formal apology on behalf of Jefferson State Bank. What happened today, there's no excuse for it, and it will be addressed internally immediately." Derek looked her in the eyes. "You sure about that?" "I am," she said steadily. "I already spoke with compliance. We'll be retraining every branch in the region, every employee, and Mr. Corbin will be placed under review effective immediately." Corbin, still near his office, sank into a chair. Joanne continued, "I also understand if you want to close your account or take legal action, but regardless, I want you to know we are taking this seriously." Derek nodded once. "You should." She seemed to hesitate, then added, "The truth is, we don't get clients like you very often. And maybe that's part of the problem. Some of our people don't know what excellence looks like in different forms." Derek studied her for a moment. Then he said something that caught her off guard. "It's not just about me. I'll be fine. I know who I am. I've been tested in ways your staff couldn't begin to imagine." He stepped closer, voice low but clear. "But the next African-American man who walks through that door in a suit might not be me. He might not have an ID that makes people salute. He might not have federal clearance or agents to back him up. He might just be trying to cash a check." Joan didn't interrupt. "And if you treat him the way I was treated today," Derek said, "he might not walk out as calmly." The words hung there, raw and honest. Joanne nodded slowly. "We'll do better." "I hope so." Derek looked around one last time. Not at the cameras, not at the silent crowd, but at the young kid near the waiting chairs, no older than 10, who had watched the entire thing with wide eyes and small fists clenched in his lap. Derek gave him a subtle nod. Then he walked out. But the impression he left behind stayed with every single person in that bank. The doors closed behind Derek. And just like that, he was gone. No headlines, no press conference, no legal team marching in, just a man who walked into a bank to move his money and walked out, having taught everyone in that building something they weren't ready to learn. Inside, silence lingered like a weight nobody could shake off. Joan Renea turned slowly and walked back toward Corbin, who was still slouched in his chair, his hands gripping the armrests. "Pack your things," she said softly. "I'll be calling HR within the hour." He didn't argue. He didn't ask for another chance. He knew. Brianna, still behind the teller window, sat down, staring at her hands. She kept replaying everything in her mind, the ID, the hesitation, the whisper to her supervisor. She hadn't called the FBI, but she hadn't spoken up either. "I didn't mean to treat him like that," she mumbled under her breath. The older woman next to her, Denise, who had worked the desk for nearly 20 years, said quietly, "Intent doesn't always matter when the damage is done, sweetheart." Brianna nodded slowly. "You think he'll come back?" Denise looked toward the glass door. "I doubt it, and I wouldn't blame him." The agents lingered for a moment longer near the door, then slipped out without a word. The bank eventually returned to normal, sort of, but the air wasn't the same. It was like everyone had been cracked open a little, forced to look at themselves under a different light. That evening, Derek sat alone on a bench at Boyle Park, a quiet green space not far from the bank. Dressed down now, jeans, sneakers, a simple t-shirt. No briefcase, just a bottle of water and the sound of cicadas in the background. A kid on a scooter zipped by. A man walked his dog. Life moved on the way it always does. Derek pulled out the confirmation slip from earlier, folded, crisp. Unnecessary at this point, but he looked at it anyway. Then he smiled just a little. Because the truth was that day wasn't about him. Not really. It was about what people expect to see. It was about how fast someone can go from customer to suspect just because they didn't fit the picture in someone else's mind. But it was also about something more powerful, how a man's dignity doesn't come from a uniform, a badge, or $1 million account. It comes from knowing exactly who you are, even when others don't. Later that night, as the bank closed, a small handwritten sign was taped to the staff break room wall. It read, "Don't be the reason someone has to prove they belong. Just treat them like they do." No one signed it, but everyone knew where it came from. We all make snap judgments. It's human. But what separates the good ones from the rest isn't perfection. It's accountability. The question is, when you're faced with a moment like that, will you stay silent? Will you assume? Or will you take a breath and lead with respect? You don't need a title to do the right thing. You don't need a uniform to stand with someone who's being treated unfairly. And you don't need to salute to show someone they deserve to be seen. If this story resonates with something real for you, share it. Discuss it. Challenge someone around you, because silence is easy.